we've, I believe, become more and more familiar, more and more comfortable, I hope, that Christ was to return in 1863. So we have to start considering that if Christ was to come back in 1863, what would we have needed to see fulfilled in prophecy for that to be a viable concept? To do that, I want us to actually look at the Great Controversy. The Great Controversy, and we're going to begin in 440.2. And we're going to continue reading through the Great Controversy paragraph by paragraph down to 442.2. For 440.2 to 442.2. And I will skip some small parts so that we can try and keep our flow of thought. She's been speaking about Revelation 17. This beast rising up out of the earth. And she says, what nation of the New World was in 1798 rising into power, giving promise of strength and greatness and attracting the attention of the world? The application of the symbol admits of no question. One nation and only one meets the specifications of this prophecy. It points unmistakably to the United States of America. So you have here, try and do this more neatly. You have here the USA rising to power. She's discussing that beast that rises up out of the earth. Next paragraph. And he had two horns like a lamb. So this beast has two horns like a lamb. These horns indicate its youth, its innocence, and its gentleness, fitly representing the character of the United States. So what do these horns represent? Represents the character of the United States. She goes on to speak about how they fled the religious oppression of the Dark Ages. They founded a nation based on the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, which sets forth the great truth that all men are created equal. So she explains the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Freedom of religious faith was also granted. Republicanism and Protestantism became the fundamental principles of this nation. These principles are the secret of its power and prosperity. So there are two fundamental principles, republicanism and Protestantism. Next paragraph. But the beast with lamb-like horns spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. Quoting Revelation 13:11-14. The lamb-like horns and dragon voice of the symbol point to a striking contradiction between the professions and the practice of the nation thus represented. So this nation has two things. It has lamb horns. It has lamb horns and a dragon voice. The lamb-like horns and the dragon voice of the symbol point to a striking contradiction between the professions and the practice of the nation thus represented. So these two things, the horns of a lamb and the voice of a dragon, point to there being a contradiction. A contradiction between what things? Its profession and its practice. So which one represents its profession? It's a megaphone, if anyone can define it. Which one is its profession? People are quiet in the chat today.
It's lost. It's voice.
Lamb.
If we can comment in the chat, if we could. The profession? You have two things. You have the horns of a lamb and the voice of a dragon. Then you have two other things being compared to them. Its profession and its practice. What is the profession associated with, and what is the practice associated with? Sister Justina, Lucas family, Sister Kathy, all say that it's the lamb. Oh, I misunderstood Sister Justina, sorry. What does the United States profess? What does it mean to profess something?
Constitution.
Through the Constitution? Practice is voice, to call itself something, profess what you believe in. You say you believe it. So I want to suggest the following. The United States, she discusses the lamb-like horns and she links them to the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Those are the two particularly highlighted things that make this beast like a lamb. This is what the United States professes to be. The Constitution is the profession of the United States. It's professing this Constitution is what we stand for. So I can say that I profess that all men are created equal. That's what I profess, and that looks lamb-like. Sister Josephine says the lamb is profession. I agree with that. That's, I think, the point I'm trying to make. The lamb-like horns, this Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, this is the profession of the United States. What it's saying that it believes in. If we were to go back some weeks to our studies about modern day Protestantism, and we discussed that article. It was an article, I think, from Adelaide. It was an Australian newspaper that spoke about how Protestant churches in America today are trying to return to the model of the papacy in the history of the 1260. And they make that point very clear. So that Protestantism today, when we go back, if we can all please remain muted, it would just help us keep focus. If we can go back to those studies and see that that those people that we listed, we discussed Donald Trump, but his administration, the people that he's appointed to lead those 7 mountains of social society, what constructs a society, what do those people profess to believe in? They all stand up and profess to believe in the Constitution. They profess to believe in freedom. They profess to believe in freedom of speech. They profess to believe in the separation of church and state. But what's the problem with their profession? There's a discrepancy between their profession and their practice. So they might profess to believe in the Constitution, to believe in freedom of religion and religious worship, but what do they practice? This represents their practice. So as we have discussed, that 7 mountain mandate, that they believe that Protestants, evangelical conservative Protestantism is required by God to control the 7 mountains of influence, which include education, the courts, the US government, media, all of those things. As they say that it's Protestants who are commanded by God to command those things, they also say that they uphold the US Constitution, which says there can be no religious test for public office, which says separation of church and state. So they profess faith in the Constitution. They profess that they have these 2 horns, but in practice, what's their problem? In practice, they speak as a dragon. Is everyone okay with that? We're okay with that? Good. Thank you, Brother Molly. So if we're all comfortable that she's speaking about horns, lamb-like horns, and dragon voice. She's saying the horns are what it professes, and the voice is what it practices. Next sentence. The speaking of the nation, so this is the dragon voice. The speaking of the nation is the action of its legislative and judicial authorities. Now, regardless how it speaks, is the United States to have legislative and judicial authorities? Yes. Question. How many branches in the US government?
3.
3 branches in the US government. Can the camera see down here?
Yes.
Legislative, judicial, and executive. If we can have a quick review of what composes these branches. If we were to consider this legislative branch, just to keep it broad, it composes essentially Congress, which Congress is a combination of the Senate and the House of Representatives. So this legislative we'll just put Congress. And also other agencies and offices designed to support Congress. The legislative, then the judicial. The judicial branch is composed, as you would expect, this is the judges. So at the highest level, it's the Supreme Court. So when Ellen White says the speaking of the nation is the action of which branches of US government? Because she's pulled out two. There's three: legislative, judicial, and executive. And she says it speaks through which ones? The executive? No. It speaks through the legislative and the judicial. Congress is the branch that writes, drafts laws. The judicial is the branch that interprets those laws and rules on those laws. So this is all about law. She leaves out the executive branch. So I want us to start to consider 2014. 2014 was a Sunday law, yes? And what problem do people have with 2014? What they're going to do is go back to that year and say, yes, but what did Obama do? Maybe it was his Affordable Care Act. Maybe it was something to do with the healthcare system. But where is all of their attention? It's essentially on the executive branch. But when the nation speaks as a dragon, where is it going to speak through? The legislative and the judicial. So if we want to understand 2014, we'll look back and see the steps the legislative branch took and the judicial branch took. And it should be easy for us to see that a Sunday law can occur while you have someone like Obama in the White House. Because if you just focus on what Obama was doing, the problem you're going to have is when Ellen White says this dragon speaks, it's not speaking through the executive, speaking through these two. So we'll remember, what did Mitch McConnell begin to do in 2014 to the judicial branch? Block Obama, the executive, from appointing judges. What did Steve Bannon and Jeff Sessions and Stephen Miller begin to do in 2014? Began to wipe out all the centrist Republicans, purge them from the Republican Party, turn it into a church-state extremist movement. So you had a massive turning point in 2014 in both the legislative and the judicial branches of the US government. And it's these two that are required at the Sunday law to speak as a dragon. All of that took place under an Obama presidency. But we shouldn't be looking to Obama to do something in 2014. Does that make sense? It happened in opposition to him, not with his approval or with his any effort of his. It was in opposition to Obama that these steps were taken in the legislative and judicial branches. And if we've discussed those steps at length. External sources are clear that the steps taken in 2014 that impacted these two branches, no matter what happens in the next 50 years, at least in the next 50 years, if not the next century, they've changed the United States to such a degree that it doesn't matter who the next president is, or the one after that, or the one after that. It would take generations to undo. Both branches changing course in 2014. So how does the executive branch relate to these two? When those three men start to purge the Republican Party of centrists, turn it into this Christian right extremist movement, when you have those Obama blocked from appointing judges, not just to the Supreme Court, but I think there's 9 lower circuit courts, what are they setting that up for? They're setting that up for a Trump presidency. Because what is Donald Trump going to do? He's going to complete that purge of the Republican Party, complete the work, bring the work to a completion that those 3 men designed, and he's going to fill the judicial branch with 7 mandate-believing judges, if I can put it that way. Place people in that branch who believe in the 7 mandate theology. So the executive branch does impact these 2 branches, which is why you would expect to see this become a form of dictatorship. You have to have the executive branch change or transform somehow to be able to create the environment for these 2 branches to speak as a dragon at the Sunday law. So we see 2014, the turning point that 2014 was. But we also see the setup that was taking place for Daniel 11:41, if I can put it this way. (2014) was a Sunday law for the priests. 2019 is Sunday law for the Levites. 2021, Sunday law for the Nethinims. Sunday law for the 144,000. So you have priests, Levites, and Nethinims. So you have this progression. And what is happening is this. What is happening is this setup, because the United States isn't just going to speak like a dragon here, if I can refer to what we said earlier, in a vacuum. It's not going to happen without some type of preparation and steps taken to lead to that point. You can't have a Sunday law on this line without the events that took place in 2014. And as we get closer and closer to the Sunday law, we should see more and more clearly these steps, how these steps are building upon one another to bring us to Daniel 11 verse 41. And we are understanding 2014. The steps that were taken there impacting the 2 branches that are... If we can please have ourselves muted. Thank you. The steps that were taken in 2014 in the legislative and judicial branch. There's a young fellow on a phone who is continuing to unmute. If we can please remain muted. Thank you. If we can refer back to 2014 and see the legislative branch and the judicial branch, and what occurred in them was a step that will take us to the Sunday law. It becomes a Sunday law for the priests, but it also refers to the progression that is necessary to bring about Daniel 11:41. But I also tried to bring back in the Trump presidency and how a change in the executive branch is necessary to bring about a change or to set up the judicial and the legislative branches where they can speak as a dragon. So I'm not suggesting that the executive branch plays no role in that process. It plays a necessary role. Mitch McConnell is blocking Obama from appointing judges to the Supreme Court in 2014 because he's waiting for 2016 and the president they're designing and setting up for. So those actions were in waiting for this president, Donald Trump, to be able to fill those judicial appointments. So he does play a role in that. But what I want us to take from this is that it's the legislative and judicial branches that speak. They speak through law, and that it is possible to have them speak through law regardless of who is President of the United States. It's possible for them to act outside the control of Obama, for example. Next sentence. By such action, it will give the lie to those liberal and peaceful principles which it has put forth as the foundation of its policy. The prediction that it will speak as a dragon and exercise all the power of the first beast plainly foretells a development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution. So you have, when this speaking illustrates that when it professes to be lamb-like, that is in fact a lie. It gives to the lie those liberal and peaceful principles which it has professed to be the foundation of its policy. The prediction that it will speak as a dragon and exercise all the power of the first beast plainly foretells a development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution. So this is going to occur not as a one-off event, but through a development of this spirit. It's a process. Such action would be directly contrary to the principles of this government, to the genius of its free institutions, to the direct and solemn avowals of the Declaration of Independence and to the Constitution. So it professes this, but it lies because it practices this. The founders of the nation wisely sought to guard against the employment of secular power on the part of the church, to separate church and state. Only in flagrant violation of these safeguards to the nation's liberty can any religious observance be enforced by civil authority. But the inconsistency of such action is no greater than is represented in the symbol. It is the beast with lamb-like horns in profession, pure, gentle, harmless, that speaks as a dragon. So I want us to spend some time, particularly on that last sentence. Last two sentences, beginning with but the inconsistency. So when we come to the Sunday law, the US government is going to speak like a dragon in practice, but what is it going to profess? It's going to be professed to be lamb-like, and it does that through its horns. If we can go through this sentence a little slower. The inconsistency of such action, the inconsistency of a Sunday law of speaking like a dragon, is no greater than is represented in the symbol or by this parable, if I can put it that way. This parable of a lamb speaking like a dragon shows a great inconsistency, and the application of that is no less inconsistent. That the United States, this lamb-like beast that professes this, is at the same time it's lamb-like, speaking as a dragon. It is the beast with lamb-like horns that speaks as a dragon. So my question is, what does the beast have when it is speaking as a dragon? If people can answer in writing in the chat. Someone has asked for the names of the 3 men that purged Congress, particularly purged the Republican Party. But that is Jeff Sessions, Stephen Miller. He's really worth researching. And they were led by Steve Bannon. Now there's a really good documentary on Frontline. I'll send it to this sister afterwards, where Steve Bannon just tells you that. It's not a conspiracy theory when they all just tell you. Sister Justina says, beast has lamb-like horns as it speaks as a dragon. So what does the beast have as it's speaking? Lamb-like horns. And what's the problem with what we say about the horns? We say that they break. Where in any of this do the horns break? Do the horns ever break? No, these horns don't break, because these horns, they are the professions of the United States. Why can't we understand that before? Because we're trying to understand the United States as a dictatorship. And when we have a simple view of what a modern dictatorship looks like, and we're taking that from an old dictatorship, what do we expect to happen at the Sunday Law? Old view. Old view is there's going to be this president come, it's a dictator, he's going to take everyone's guns away, disarm the population, and then he's going to abolish elections, he's going to rule for life, he's going to cut apart the Constitution, throw it away, throw away the Bill of Rights, throw away the Declaration of Independence. That's the old view we would have for an American dictatorship. And God has had to lead us on this path of seeing dictatorship looks different in our time than it did in their time. Just as we see that this, thank you, Brother Esteban has posted the link to the documentary I was speaking about in the chat box. I can't open that to see if that's the correct one, but I trust him. Zero tolerance, that's the one. So, we have this old idea about what World War III would look like. We were expecting nuclear weapons, Russian troops on American soil, and we've had to let that go and increasingly understand the message both becoming more simple and also more complex at the same time, that World War III looks different in our time than World War I and World War II. We look at what is happening in the United States today and see that our old view of a dictatorship in the US is inconsistent with what we are taught and what we are seeing. This idea that there's going to be someone rise up who's going to abolish elections, throw away the Constitution, and take everyone's guns away from them is inconsistent with the model that God has given. When we find in inspiration, Ellen White, or even back in Revelation itself, we never see these horns broken, because the United States never stops professing to uphold the Constitution. It never stops professing to be a republic. If it stopped professing and then it spoke like a dragon, would there be any inconsistency? No. The inconsistency is that it is speaking like a dragon, at the same time it's professing to be a republic, a democracy. I'm not sure if people still have questions about that. Stand to the side or the horns come up bad. I'm not sure if people still have questions about that. I think it's something we're going to have to go over a number of times. To see the idea that the horns are broken, we need to see that those horns are a profession that is violated, that they don't keep to that profession. But as we refine our understanding, they never stop professing. So those horns as a symbol are never actually broken. It's just that this beast starts showing greater and greater inconsistency between what it professes and what it practices through the legislative and judicial branches. So as I said at the beginning, I'm not trying to attack what we've taught in the past. What we have taught in the past was a necessary step to bring us to a greater understanding of what these horns represent and how they, in a large degree, cease to be practiced by the United States. They show greater and greater inconsistency. Through the development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution. So there's just a couple of things I want us to take from today before we go into next week. We first began by discussing how our message opens up, and I wanted to do that to prepare us that what we are doing is not looking at the past with this critical eye saying people made mistakes. What we do is look in the past and see, wow, God led us wisely and He led us gently. And then we take another step and we advance in our understanding. As we have done with King of the North, King of the South, as we have done, continue to do with Islam, as we continue to do with our understanding of the United States and this lamb-like beast. Then I wanted to remind us of where we get the three groups called priests, Levites, and Nethinims. We got that from the book of Ezra that related to this issue here, that this calling out of Babylon. But we have taught it over the last month through the structure of the end of ancient Israel, the calling out of Roman paganism, their concepts of the Apis bull. From there we went into discussing Millerite history, and what we wanted to understand is what had to happen in this time period for Christ to come back in 1863 and the prophecies pertaining to the United States to be fulfilled. So we've gone back to the lamb-like beast and seeing what this lamb-like beast was to do before the second advent. What it was to do was to show its inconsistency in that while it's lamb-like, it speaks as a dragon. We discussed how it speaks through the legislative and judicial branches. While Ellen White doesn't mention the executive, we understand the role that the executive plays on these two branches. We began to discuss how these lamb-like horns are not described as breaking, because we need to understand a United States that still professes to uphold the Constitution. Donald Trump would say, to kind of put it in his words, no person ever living has ever honoured the Constitution the way he honours it. He likes that type of language. But he'll claim to uphold it. The Republican Party will claim to uphold it. Evangelical leaders will claim to uphold it. But it's hypocrisy. It's a hypocritical beast. They profess it. They do not practice it. And because they profess it, a great deal of people, including many Adventists, are about to be deceived. The only way that you are deceived is if you are tricked, essentially. And if the president stands up and says, I no longer profess this, there is no deception. This creates the danger. And we have to understand these things, because as we open up a further investigation of Millerite history, somewhere in here, the United States has to have spoken like a dragon. There had to be a growth in the spirit of intolerance and persecution that led to the point where the United States was going to speak as a dragon. So as we open up that history, we want to look at the external events that led to that point and were that point. So we're going to have just a short question and answer now, but I'll close in prayer. So the video can be cut here, but the Q&A will also be uploaded. So if you will kneel with me, I know that we've covered a few different subjects. We will review them. We will particularly know how to review them as people ask their questions. So questions are a very helpful process in this investigation of this history. So please feel comfortable to speak. But we'll first close in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you, Lord, for our blessings. Thank you for your goodness and your wisdom, that you have led us so gently. We see that external events as well as internal events are opening up in much clearer detail. But we also see how you have and continue to lead us gently, only feeding us from first from milk and then from soft foods into more solid, only what we can digest at a particular point in time. Lord, may it not shake our faith, but may we see how you, through your wisdom, have dealt with your people, not just in this history, in this reform line, but the consistency of how you have done this over 6,000 years. May we be willing to advance and not wish to tie ourselves down to the light that we currently have. I pray you grant us wisdom in these things and continue to lead and guide us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.